Something strange roams the cemetery at night. I never should have moved to this place. I should have stayed in my crummy little cockroach-infested apartment downtown. Those tenacious little monsters are bad enough, but my current predicament is worse than cockroaches or bedbugs. A lot worse. Let me explain. For years, I was looking for a house I could afford. It was a dream of mine to own a place that I could call my own, just like my parents' house where I had grown up and had so many good memories. I was sick of paying rent. I wanted to plan for my retirement and build a nest egg for the future. I socked away cash for a down payment, practically starving myself and working overtime and weekends for years. But the price of homes in my city kept skyrocketing, far outpacing my savings. Eventually, I determined the only way I could be able to buy a place was if it was in a neighborhood town, somewhere small and out of the way where nobody else wanted to live. Finally, I managed to find a place, though it meant lowering my standards substantially. I settled down in the tiny bungalow on a quiet street in a lonesome little town called Hollow's End. The house was modest, but I got it for a bargain. "It's the old groundkeeper's place," the realtor told me. "He's got no use for it anymore. Not where he is." The man looked down at the ground with a sad look on his face and shook his head. I nodded sympathetically and closed the deal with a handshake. The one-story home is old, square, dingy white, and squat like a mushroom. Its roof is a bit off the level and dips down at one end, a characteristic I naively thought to be charming at first. But because of structural issues, everything in the attic is a little bit mushy, and on rainy days, I have to set out buckets in strategic places to catch the steady drip, drip, drip of water, which inevitably finds its way through the ceiling. Yellow spots can be seen here and there when you look up in pretty much any room in the house. Floors in the place are likewise slanted and dip down towards the center, making an unnatural gully that tricks the observer's eye and makes you feel like you're in a funhouse at the carnival when you step inside. But like I said, I got a good deal on the place. I plan to fix the roof and floors and repair the water damage in order to make it a home for many years to come. I even have a brand new Home Depot do-it-yourself book that I plan to make excellent use of very soon. But things have changed after what happened last night. I was awoken from a dead sleep by a clank and a clatter. It sounded like it was coming from the cemetery behind the house. There was an odd orange glow coming in from my window as well. My half-asleep mind tried to make sense of the noise. Every inch of my body tensed up, and my throat became tight with fear, my mouth dry. The sound of my heartbeat drummed in my ears, deafeningly in time with the pounding force of it against the ribcage in my chest. In the darkness of my bedroom, the glowing orange light became brighter, the noise louder as it came closer. Desperately, my mind raced to try to picture what could make those noises. The sound of heavy chains rattling, perhaps? Someone dragging them around the cemetery? But why? Whoever it was, I heard them come nearer to the back of my house, closer and closer until I could hear the ragged, wheezing sound of them breathing. The chain-link fence at the back of my property rattled and shook like someone was pressing their weight against it. The orange glow of the light it carried flickered and shone intermittently brighter and darker, like whoever it was carried a torch or a lantern. I realized I was holding my breath, afraid to make a sound, for I knew that whoever it was outside my house, they were not human. The way they moved and the sound of their breathing, the rattling of the chains they carried with them. Maybe it's a prank, my thoughts said. Some kids outside, teenagers trying to scare you. Just go to the window and look out, and you'll see some drunken college kids doing what drunken college kids do. Hijinks. I stood on wobbly legs and checked the time on my phone. 3:10 a.m. The noise of whoever it was breathing and their chains rattling against my fence made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. It's not kids. It's something else. Something you're not meant to see. Something no one should ever see. Don't look at it. My bare feet patted against the cold hardwood floor of my bedroom, and I heard the soft tink, tink, tink of a bucket catching rainwater in the kitchen. As I got closer to the window, I heard it pouring outside as well. And then the loud crash of thunder made me jump, my heartbeat spiking disturbingly faster and harder for a few moments until my mind realized what had happened. It's just thunder and lightning, nothing to be scared of. You're not a little kid anymore. The curtains were pulled across, letting in just a little bit of light that peeked through the center. I pulled the gap open wider with a trembling hand and looked out. In the rain, standing with a hand against my fence, was a black hooded creature. It looked like a grim reaper crossed with a millipede. Far too many legs and a long body that extended long and lumpy out behind it. It carried a lantern and a pale, crooked claw, talon-like fingernails wrapped around it. It was difficult to discern many details in the dark, and with that billowing cloak wrapped around it, but I thought I saw talismans and medallions made of gold around its neck. One of them looked like an hourglass. The creature held a long, thin chain. Swinging suspended from it was a lantern, a flickering flame held inside a glass box. It watched me closely for a few seconds, its features indiscernible inside the hood it wore, which cast its face in shadows. I could not stand to look at it for a moment longer and covered the window with the curtains once again. Backing away on unsteady legs, I heard a sound escaping my lips that I did not recognize as my own voice. There was a part of me that wanted to just curl up in the fetal position and hide in bed under the covers, whimpering until morning. That part of me won handily. Bravery is not one of my strong suits. I did not sleep, though. A sound kept me awake all night. The sound of digging. The next morning I looked outside again, not quite as afraid in the light of day, and saw the creature was gone. Green rolling hills and plain ordinary tombstones stared back at me from behind the house once again. I almost managed to convince myself it had all been a dream. But there was something else back there too. Just behind my fence, where the thing had been standing, was a very large hole. This hole was different from the typical rectangular ones seen in a cemetery. It was large and round, and when I went out to look at it more closely, I observed with some concern that it was leading towards my house. The sound of steady digging could be heard from deep inside. The floor seemed to tremble and sink a little more beneath my feet when I went back inside my house. I went into the bedroom to grab a few precious things and ran back out through the living room. I clutched my laptop and some irreplaceable memorabilia in my arms, and it all went flying suddenly when the floor caved in beneath my feet. Falling down into the darkness beneath my house, I landed in a cavernous space, freshly dug from the earth. I screamed for help, and to my surprise, heard a voice up above. It sounded like my real estate agent. He ignored my pleas for help and continued speaking calmly to someone who was with him. "Oh, it's about time. Now we can start showing this dump again and try to reel in another buyer." What were they talking about? That was my house. I screamed obscenities at them, but they continued on, unfazed. And then I saw the broken floor I had fallen through begin to mend itself. The cracked floorboards stretched back together like healing skin. Their faces looked down at me finally and smiled. "This isn't your house," they said together as one. "This place belongs to the groundskeeper. Always has. Always will." And with that, the floor sealed itself back together, and they were gone, leaving me alone in the darkness. I really wish I had just stayed in my old apartment.